In this video, I want to take what we were doing with shape transformations and build on that. Let's begin with our primary shapes. I'm going to come over to my toolbox and click and hold on my rectangle tool. I'm going to release over top of this fly off button to fly out my shape tools in their own panel. I'm going to start off with a square. I'm going to choose my rectangle tool and hold down my shift button. I'm going to drag out a square like so. This shape, of course, has the default appearance of all new shapes in new documents in Illustrator, white fill with a black stroke. I'm going to come over to my color panel. I'm going to change my fill color by bringing my fill indicator forward and setting that to black. And I'm going to get rid of the stroke by bringing the stroke indicator forward and setting that to none. Let's create some more shapes. I'm going to come over here to my ellipse tool. I'm going to hold down my shift button. I'm going to click and drag out a perfect circle like so. There's two of our three primary shapes. The next shape is a triangle. And if we come over to our toolbox, quickly see that, we don't have a triangle as such, but hey, we do have a polygon tool. Let me select the polygon tool. The polygon tool by default gives us a hexagram, a six-sided figure. But of course, that's not what we're looking for. I'm going to press delete. The way we can turn our hexagram tool into a triangle tool is by selecting it. And this time, rather than clicking and dragging like we've done previously, I'm going to take my cursor and just click once somewhere on the artboard. And you can see our polygon dialog box now appears. Let's make our sides 3. And I'm going to say OK. I'm going to use my black arrow tool to reposition that, and I'm going to make this a little bit larger. I'm going to hold down the shift button as I do, though, because that will constrain that to, again, an equilateral triangle as I have here. I'm going to reposition each one of these like so. We're going to do a little bit of exploration with each. First of all, let's do something with this square. I'm going to duplicate this square by holding down the Option button and dragging out another instance like so. In our cut paper exercise, I had you take these primary shapes and dissect them to smaller sections. Well, let's do that with this. We're going to come over to my toolbox. I'm going to click and hold on my eraser tool to reveal a subset of tools. One of them is the knife tool. In fact, I'm going to float all these tools out into their own panel as well. The knife tool, when I select it, allows me to cut shapes into smaller shapes. I'm going to cut this square that I have selected right here. I'm going to begin by clicking outside the shape and then dragging through it like as if I was cutting it with a knife. And you can see what's happened. If I come over to my black arrow and click off, so nothing is selected, I can now come back here and click on that. Let me select this shape again. I'm going to come back to my knife tool and I'm going to cut it into smaller sections. Choose my selection arrow again. Click off so nothing is selected, then come back and select those shapes one at a time. Now, while that is kind of interesting, I'm going to do something else with this. Let me transform this once more. I'm going to select those shapes, and again, I'm going to hold down my Option button, and you can see I get a double-headed arrow. That allows me to duplicate an object and drag it out like so. With this copy, I'm going to select these pieces, and I'm going to give them a little bit of a skew. Like this. It's interesting to see how offsetting these pieces makes this arrangement somehow a little bit more interesting. I think I could enhance this too if I was to select one of those objects, and using the bounding box, I can click and rotate some of these pieces. I really like how the offsetting of position and the rotation of these pieces has created a much more organic arrangement. Let's try a different transformation with this shape. Again, I'm going to duplicate it by holding down the Option button and clicking and dragging out another instance of it like this. I'm going to make a couple of small changes to this shape. First of all, I'm going to scale this down just a little bit. Again, I want to keep the perfect circle shape, so I'm going to resize this using the bounding box anchor and holding down the Shift button and clicking and dragging to make that a smaller version of itself. I'm going to move that up just a little. I'm going to make another version of this circle, again, by holding down the Option button. I get the double-headed arrow, and I'm going to click and drag another instance of this circle. I'm going to drag it to the right only so far as there. What I'd like to do with these two shapes is cut out their intersection. So where they overlap, I would like that part to be white. To do that, I need to have both shapes selected. Remember how we do that. In order to have both shapes selected, I need to click on one, and then holding down the Shift button, click on the other one. And then I have both of them selected. The intersection can be removed from overlapping shapes. Let's come over to our toolbox And I'm going to choose this tool here, the Shape Builder tool. The Shape Builder tool, when I hover over top of these objects, you can see that Illustrator is able to discern their intersection. If I was to click and drag over top of all of them, I could turn them into one single shape. I'm going to press Command Z on my keyboard to undo that. To subtract shapes from one another, I need to press the Option button or the Alt button for PC users. And when I do, you see that my cursor now displays a minus sign. It gives us a clue as to how it's going to behave. When I hover over top of this intersection and click, now I've managed to subtract that shape. I'm going to come back over to my black selection tool, selecting that shape. I'm going to hold down my Option button to get the double-headed arrow and drag out another instance of that shape. These shapes, as you can see, are now separate. I could move them like this, for example. These two circular shapes could be used as a motif in a pattern. Let me show you how that would be done. I'm going to select both of these shapes by holding down the Shift button and selecting them both. And I'm going to come to the Window drop-down menu. We saw in the introduction to Illustrator video that the Window drop-down menu is where we see a number of panels that are not currently open. The panel that I would like to work with is the Pattern options. I'm going to select that. And you see that there is a new panel that opens up. We're going to do more with patterns in a later video, but let me just show you how this works. Right now, the entire panel is grayed out. Nothing is selectable. What we need to do is come over to this Panel's Options button right here and select Make Pattern. I'm going to select OK. This is going to show me a different view, and you can see that my shapes have now become a pattern. We can change some of the parameters of this view. For example, if I come here to Brick by Column and then change my height value by clicking inside that field and pressing the down arrow, you can see that I can get to a point where I can have an intersecting pattern like this. Once I have the pattern set up the way that I want, I just need to come up here to where it says Done. You may be wondering where that pattern went to. That pattern is now in our Swatches panel here, you can see. If I wanted to apply that as a pattern, I just need to create a shape. Let me come over to my Rectangle tool and fill it with that new pattern. The pattern inside that box can be modified, again, by utilizing one of our tools in our toolbox. In this case, the Scale tool. To make this transformation, let's double-click the Scale tool to bring up the Scale tool's option panel. I want you to notice in the Options section here that there is a checkbox next to Transform Objects and Transform Patterns. If I uncheck Transform Objects, any transformations we make up here will be applied only to the pattern inside of it. Watch this. I'm going to select the Uniform Scale field and type in 25%. I'm going to click on the Preview button to see that, and I've now created a pattern out of those shapes. I'm going to say OK. Let's make a transformation of this triangle here. Again, I'm going to duplicate it by holding down the Option button and dragging out another instance of that object. In our cut paper exercise, we experimented with rough-edged paper. This object, with its vector forms, looks far too clean-edged. Let's roughen this up a little bit. I'm going to zoom into it though first by pressing the Command and plus sign on the keyboard a couple of times. I'm going to come to the Effects drop-down menu. The Effects drop-down menu has a number of very interesting options, and we'll explore these in greater detail later. But for now, I just want you to come to Distort and Transform. And from this flyout menu, I want you to choose Roughen. And you can see how the roughen effect works with these default settings. But let's modify these a little bit so that this looks a little bit closer to a torn paper edge. The first thing I'm going to change is the size, but I'm going to change it not through a relative value, but an absolute value. I'm just going to click on that. And you can see already it's made the size variation much more subtle. I can now use this slider to make that even more subtle still. You may have a different unit value here. Whatever you choose, I think it should feel a little bit like that in size. The detail, if I bring that up, you can see that I can get something that's even a little bit more rough. Again, I don't want it to feel too rough, maybe something like that. Finally, the points could be either smooth or corner. I'm going to leave it at corner just because I think that looks a little bit better than smooth, but you can choose smooth if you want. I'm going to say OK. I now have something that looks like a torn edge. Press Command 0 on my keyboard to zoom out. In our next video, we are going to take these transformations in Illustrator a little bit further.